This is the homework video for Color Study 3, Landscape Color Study 3. We're going to do this Vie de Vrai by Corot. Now, we studied Corot last week, and we know that he's a romantic painter that was a precursor to the Impressionists. And I'm going to start out by measuring. So this is 6.5 by 4 7/8. So I'm going to find the center of my paper like I always do, and we're going to center this rectangle that's exactly the same size as this onto the paper. So this is a 9 by 6 inch piece of paper, so I've got to divide into 4.5 and 3. So my short side, well, I'll start with the 6.5. That's a little bit easier. I'm going to divide 6.5 into 3 1/4. So I'm going to put my line on the 3 1/4 and mark the 0 and the 6.5. This keeps me from having to move my ruler as often and should be more accurate and also simpler, less work. I'd rather do the calculation than all the movement. Okay, if you feel nervous, you can put 3 tick marks so that perhaps you could identify which one is a little bit off if you feel like one of them isn't quite right. Okay, so 4 7/8 is almost 5 inches. So it's 5 inches minus 1/8. So if I divide that 8 in half, that's a 16th. So if I do 2 1/2, which is half of 5, and then I move it over by a 16th, then I can just mark the 0 and the 4 7/8. And again, if you haven't mastered this skill and you feel confused, please get some help from somebody. Ask your parents. You can come in and talk to me, but this is just something that you're going to have to kind of work through, measurement and fractions. Okay, so I'm going to take my masking tape and I'm going to stick it to my clothes so that I don't have too sticky of a tape that it's going to rip my paper. And this top and bottom edge are so close to the edge that I'm actually going to just use one piece of tape and line it up. As I go into the sides, because this is a little bit of a squarish rectangle, I'm going to have to tape twice. So the point of stretching the paper is to get the paper to go back to flat after it absorbs the water, and that way the shape of it doesn't become unpredictable. So that's the main thing that I'm doing, but then I'm going to use these extra pieces of tape as I go in here, because for convenience sake, I will have a nice clean edge if I'm able to just go to the edge of the painting over onto the tape, and then when I take the tape off, I will have a nice straight clean edge that I couldn't probably make very well with a paintbrush, especially without including outlines in my brush strokes. Okay, so now I've got the paper stretched and a nice clean edge. Okay, so I have this done, and then I'm going to set up my palette, and I'm always going to set up my paint in the same order. So I'm going to start with red, and we have a really limited palette, but we're going to stick to the format every single time because I want to get used to knowing where my paints are. And I'm going to have 2 whites so that if one gets dirty, I have another clean one. Although I am going to try to keep everything clean all the time just to make things simple for myself. Okay, now I'm looking for my Sharpie. There it is. Okay, I'm going to draw a circle around my medium. Now, I wouldn't normally do this, because I know that I put medium at the end, but until you're used to that, it looks so much like white paint that I want you to be able to identify it easily. And so we'll use that circle. If you have another method, use it. You can make a square instead, okay, or a triangle. So we're gonna simplify to 3 colors. I have my color wheel in front of me so that I can get an idea of which colors are gonna be used where, or which colors I need to make which combinations. And I'm going to simplify this into blue and this pinkish brown and green. That pretty much covers everything. I've got blue in the sky, I've got blue in the water, and also here along the horizon. And then there's brown everywhere too. I've got brown here in the reflection, also along the riverbank, and definitely in these trees. We always want to simplify the landscape to 3 colors. Corot painted in the landscape in person a lot, and the reason he was able to do that is because at the time that he's living, tubes of pre-mixed paint are available for the first time in history. So an artist doesn't have to be in a workshop actually grinding his own pigments into paint. He can just go buy some tubes of paint at a store and go out into the landscape. This is revolutionary in the history of art. Also, when you're painting in the landscape, you want to keep a simple palette, and because you don't have to carry a lot, you don't want to keep track of a lot of paints, you don't want to have to get a lot of paints in and out of your satchel or your bag or whatever you have, you know, constantly refilling them. And then part of the way that a painting can come together quickly is to have a limited palette that you're kind of utilizing all over the painting. So we're going to mix a basic blue, and this pigment is a little bit different than what Corot would have had. We have something called primary blue in our set. And that's okay. I want to dull it a little bit. So orange, I want to add the complementary color. So orange is across from blue. So I want to add a little bit of yellow and red. And I'm going to do what I did last time and actually mix mix an orange. Now recall that the yellow pigment that we have here is much, much weaker than the red. So I'm going to just use a little bit of red and a lot of yellow. Okay, and here I have an orange. And I'm gonna put a little bit over here. So I don't want to totally change this color because whatever I mix, I might not like. Okay, this is kind of green. And I don't want it to be green, so I'm gonna add the complement of green. I'm just gonna put a tiny bit of red in here. Okay, that's okay. Add a little more blue. All right, that's getting there. Okay, so here's a dark version of the color. And let's make it a little lighter because this is quite a light color. Okay, I'm happy enough with that. This isn't quite ultramarine blue, so I think that's what Corot would have been using, or something more like ultramarine than what I have. Okay, now we're gonna go on to brown. Brown is an orange. So I'm gonna leave that orange there because that's not quite enough. And I'm gonna make an orange here. Now to turn orange into brown, I need to add the complement, which is blue. So I essentially need to dull this. Okay, my palette's a little fanned out there. Okay, so add some blue to this just to see what's gonna happen. I added way too much. Okay. Yeah, I want it to be a little more pink. So I'm gonna add some more red. Yeah, I think that's getting closer. If I can get this red streak mixed in there. Yeah, that's much closer. And I'll add a little bit of white over here. Yeah, that's pretty good. I want it a little more red than that, so I'm gonna be very careful. There's just something about this pink undertone to this brown that seems very important to the color balance. Okay, much better. So we'll see how that goes. I'm gonna add a little bit more red to this one too. So I'm counting this as one color, but you know, adding white. So you see how far I've expanded my palette just by mixing, and even despite simplifying to 3 colors. Now I need a green, so that means I need yellow and blue. And I don't want a lot of blue because blue is the strongest color I have here. Okay, this is kind of a grass green or like headed towards sort of a vibrant green. I definitely want to dull this, so I need to add some more red, which is the complement. So I want a more brown green, and I can look on here. So this is actually more like what I want. But that blue's not quite doing what I had in mind, so okay. I'm happy enough with this for now. Okay, I'm just gonna clean my palette knife so it's ready for me to use again. And I'm just constantly wiping my palette knife, but this is a habit that I've developed. I have not thought about it actually the whole time I've been sitting here. So I know it seems like, oh, I gotta wipe it off every time, but actually if you just build the habit, then you're not fighting with the colors being mixed together. Also, you wanna mix with your palette knife because you can see how I can just wipe it off. If I had paint on my brush, I'd have to wash it and blot it and wash it and blot it to get it completely clean. And I don't want all my colors to just mix together. Okay. So let's build a structure for this painting. I'm gonna start with a medium-sized brush. I could use a flat. I don't have to use a round. And since this is my underpainting, I'm just gonna add some water. I wanna put a lot of pigment down. And my blue is certainly different than Corot's, as yours will be. So we just have to accept some things because he has different pigments than we do. And that's okay. Okay, I want to think about where does this end? And I don't want to just paint the whole thing blue, okay? Corot would not have done that. We want to keep the structure of the painting, or in other words, the drawing, the entire time that we're working. Because we want to respond not to a color field, but to the shapes and the color at the same time. This is a critical thing to understand. So I don't want to just paint the sky blue and then paint over it. I want to be constantly responding to the shapes. That's what gives me the advantage of the artist and not like the printmaker or something like that. Okay. Or of the commercial printer who has to plan differently. We're always responding to the image. And in this case, we're responding to Corot's landscape, but in other times we might be responding to the landscape itself. So I'm going to count this water as blue. And it's more white than what I have, but again, I'm just trying to get this in here. And this layering of color is actually to my advantage, because the way the light plays on layers of color is different than on solid fields of color. And so as I build this up, I'm going to be able to change it around and respond to it. Okay, I'm gonna get a clean paper towel for blotting here. I'll come back in here and do more blue on this horizon and in this trees in a minute, but let's go with green because that's the next like really dominant color that I think I need. And I think I want to change this. I think I want more blue. It's just too yellow of a green. Okay, let's try that. And when you guys are mixing color, I want you to make sure that you're responding to Corot and not to me. Like, you can certainly use my suggestions in mixing paint and thinking about the colors, but I want you to decide that you're happy with the color, because that's part of the skill that you need to develop. If you're alone in front of a landscape making your very own painting, you're gonna have to make the decisions. Okay, now Corot has a couple of different greens in here, but we're just gonna go with this basic one. And I see green over here. And this is actually kind of a green blue. It's quite beautiful the way he incorporates these colors together and creates so much variety. You see the importance of having the same shape of rectangle here as Corot does. And that keeps my painting from getting distorted. Because if I had a long, skinny rectangle, for example, it would be harder to imitate what Corot has done here. Okay, now this tree, I want to add some white. To this green because it's much softer. Maybe that's too white. One of the great things about Corot is the way he layers the light behind the trees and the trees themselves. He's really a master at that, and he's responding to the landscape in a really significant way in order to do that. So we're going to try to imitate his technique as best we can and guess about what he would have done. So let's get some green in here. So as I kind of sit back and look at this, I see that my shapes are similar to what I see over here, which is what I'm trying to do. This isn't an exact copy. This is a tiny canvas compared to what Corot's working on. I'm actually gonna switch to a smaller brush. Will you help me? And even a square brush will help. Get these rectangular planes of this building. The brown helps to divide the horizon and the shore from the reflection in the water. There's even some brown in the sky. I would say this is the color that's being used for the clouds. Actually, my trees are too tall. Brown down here to make these shapes. These figures I'll put in like I did last time at the last minute. Okay, this is actually starting to look like his painting. I've got the major shapes as similar. And you can start to see as we play back and forth here between the sky in the background and the trees in the foreground, this beautiful luminosity gets created, and this is fantastic. This is one of the reasons that I love Corot. And again, this is in the National Gallery of Art in DC, so you could go see it the next time you're in Washington. The National Gallery is free to go, so you can go in, and if you're on the mall anyway, you can go look at one painting and walk out, and you're not any poorer. So I'm judging relative value with these browns. And at some point I'll go back in with a little bit of blue. This painting is also old, so it was probably brighter when he first painted it. Okay. Now we've got to make some new decisions. And I would say that there are some really dominant transitions here that are blue, and this one's almost purple. So as a next stage, I'm gonna look for these blues, and I'm gonna make a like purplier blue over here. So I've simplified, I've observed the painting pretty closely, and as I observe and look back at it more and more, because I'm constantly looking over here, I'm not even as often looking at the painting that I'm making. Let's see how this is if I add some white. I'm seeing things that I didn't notice before, and as I make a comparison between mine and Corot's, I'm able to see more and more details. Okay. I think I made this too light, but I don't want it all to go darker, so I'm just gonna mix over here. And do you see how I'm constantly strategizing with the way I'm arranging my paint to make it simple for myself, to get as many colors as possible out of the one color by only taking part of it, etc. I'm gonna add a little bit more. So I've mixed 3 colors, but I've gotten all of this, and I've turned many colors into just a slightly different color in order to get what I need out of it. I'm gonna go back in here with my flat brush again, which I had cleaned before. Okay, and there's this nice blue accent and also sort of outline above the landscape. Ooh, look at that. You see what that did to the painting? It pushed back that land that's like further away from me. That's beautiful. And see, by imitating Corot, we learn how to do these kinds of things, and then by actually making it happen for ourselves in our own paintings in imitation of Corot, this becomes a skill that you have in your own landscape painting. But you can see how dramatically effective that was. Okay, I think this is a little bit of a cross between a green and a blue in some of these areas. And I literally think he's just mixing these colors together. At this point in a painting, he would be trying to capture the shapes by responding to what he sees in the landscape, and would not have been interested in like mixing a bunch of colors if he didn't need to. So that's how we see the same colors over and over again. Not to say that we can't go back and mix a color if we really want to, but to get the structure of the painting, if we can use what we have, we're gonna keep going with that. I'm gonna go one step purpler for the edge of this bank. So let me take some of this. Oh yeah, that's what I want it to look like. Okay, so this is more purple. And that's what I see here. And it's like just coming up. This layering that he does is incredible, but very sort of simple concept that's effective in capturing the light. Corot's great at very complex light, and it creates a mood that is quite wonderful. Okay, so see, that's coming forward. I've got some shadows here on the ground that I can build over, and this constant back and forth that he makes between what's dark and what's light, what's pushed back and what's coming forward is really helpful. Okay, so up here I've got to put some blue. I'm gonna go back to this. Let's see. Yeah, this sort of light medium blue. The other thing it does to use the same color over and over again, or the same colors over and over again, is it unifies the painting. So the viewer doesn't even quite realize that that's what's happening. But as we have these same colors circulating over and over again, there is a harmony to the whole thing. And so he's thinking light and shadow, and then also a little bit of hue, a little bit of intensity, a little bit of technique in terms of how he's layering the paint in order to create the light. And he's got these little parts that stick out, but they're also blending in with what's going on around. So yeah, just generally quite brilliant. And I learned about it by doing it, and I notice it more deeply by imitating it. So we're learning straight from Corot, as you can see. And what could be better than that, right? This is a little bit lighter, and you can see in the painting, this is another layer. Now, I'm not gonna do as many layers as Corot did on these reflections and on the water, but I still want to get that effect. Do you see how that's starting to have that sort of soft, reflective, I don't know, it's almost like he's made the light up here in the sky, and then he's recreated again in the reflection, which is naturally what happens, but the way that he does it is just so exciting because it's similar in technique and becomes similar in appearance, and it's otherworldly. Like, the landscape looks like this, but it doesn't quite look like this. So he's given us something else, so we're able to appreciate the beauty of nature and the beauty of painting at the same time, and that's magical. Okay, I'm getting close. Now somehow, I think there's a little bit of yellow in here that I can't avoid. A little bit of orangey yellow, like right here, and a little bit of yellow down here. So let me go back to this orange that I made, this simple orange. I'm just gonna add a little bit of white. And if you wanna mix with your palette knife, go ahead. If you feel unsure, I'm getting to the end of my palette, so I'm not as worried, because I'm getting to the end of my painting, so I'm not as worried about making things messy, and I'm mixing very, very teeny tiny small amounts of paint. Okay, quite beautiful the way he's got all of this in here. And I just want some, and see how that brought that forward. So we're also learning through this to think about the space. How can we make the space? There's some people over here. This pops out, this pops out. So I'll go back in there. And then if we add some more yellow to this, little wildflowers in the landscape. And it's amazing how this plays on our memory and our understanding of a landscape vista, but then shows us something else that's completely enthralling. So, okay, I'm gonna put this guy's hat here eventually. Oh, and this woman also has a yellow hat. Look how simple that is. This is too watery. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my brown and try to get some of these brighter. I'm not gonna do the windows, I don't think. You could do the windows if that seems important to you. I'm gonna go back here and make a lighter brown, and then I'm gonna glaze over because I don't want to lose my drawing. Kind of, because of the water, it's kind of striated, so I'm gonna move to that just a little bit if I can. And again, I want to use my painting to experiment a little bit and see, like, what can I make the paint do? Okay, pretty happy with this. I'm gonna put these branches in here. Let me go back to this brush. I think your narrow brush is a little bit bigger than mine, but that's actually good. This one's kind of too big. This one's a little bent, so I think your brush situation is better than mine in terms of that. Let me do one more thing. Now that I'm looking at this in comparison to mine, I just want this to be a little more yellow. Like, just get a little bit of yellow green in here. Because I think that'll bring forward the ground here in the front. So let's see what this will do. And I think I want to glaze this. I'm not sure that's what Corot did, but I don't want to lose my drawing here. I just want this to get lighter and yellower. Get rid of that white. Okay. I go in here with my dark brown. dark enough. Because these branches stand out, and the darkness of them compared to the background actually brings them forward in space. And this is one of the things that we deal with in a landscape. We have vast space. And we have to demonstrate that somehow. Or at least be aware of responding to it. Okay. Wonderful. And some of this brown gets reused down here. Over here. Okay, I'm gonna put this lady in here. Kind of a brownish green for her backpack. She's standing right along the edge here. And I can see her sleeve. My paint's getting dry. Her sleeve and her arm. And then a reddish brown for her dress. And if they weren't so dry, all I'm doing is reusing these browns as skin tones for her. And this guy over here, he's got kind of a light green, but dull jacket, vest kind of thing. And then blue sleeves. This one's darker because it's in shadow. Light and shadow, light and shadow, light and shadow. Okay. He has a shadow on the side of his hat. Okay. Final thoughts. I just want to address this a little bit more and do a little bit more layering. Just to kind of lighten this up. And Corot's used a bunch of colors here. I want it to be simple. I have the blue that I see. And let me touch a little bit of sky into this, because we can just very much see the sky light coming through here. Okay, I'm gonna consider this painting to be done. I'm gonna let it dry. I'm not gonna unstretch it until it is dry. And this was lovely to explore Corot and become familiar with his technique even more than we already were. So I'll see you next time.